Can we get some Barry White up in here, Chris? It's Valentine's weekend as a recording of this podcast. I'm a big believer in Valentine's Day. I think that should be the premier holiday in American culture. And I believe that all boyfriends, husbands, significant others, partners, whatever label you wear, should go out and buy all kinds of gifts to bestow on your significant other. And maybe I'm lying. Maybe I think it's totally made up, and Hallmark just likes to sell lots of cards, and flower makers like to sell tons of roses. That
Russell Stover just put a hit out on you.
I'm more of a Ferrero and Rocher, or whatever that name is. Maybe some Godiva. Oh God, you had me at Godiva.
Right.
Well,
Ghirardelli. That way, it's an Italian that ties in with this episode's guest to some extent, right?
Yes, there you go.
A little bit.
That did not sound like an Italian accent.
Well, no, we'll get to that though. All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. We appreciate you guys joining us today from wherever you're tuning in. If you happen to be watching us on the Accessa YouTube channel and you haven't already subscribed, please do so and hit that notification bell so you can be alerted when new episodes like this one drop. Today, it is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Darren Christiaens from ICA North America. He is, at the moment, located at their new North American facility in Toronto, Canada. Darren, welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. As you can tell, for those who aren't familiar with ICA for some reason, they are an Italian coatings manufacturer. And then as you can now tell from Darren's accent, he is not Italian. With that said, Darren, why don't you do a quick background introduction of yourself, where you're from, maybe a little bit about your past, and then ultimately what got you into this industry and why ICA?
Well, originally I'm from the UK, a small town called Derby, which is quite close to Nottingham. Originally, after I left college, I went to work for a manufacturer in the UK, Morel's. I left Morel's to move to North America because my father is Canadian, so I get dual nationality. So I was able to move over here, no problem at all. I ended up moving to Vancouver, working for a company that was a distributor of ICA. And from there, a little jaunt back to Europe for a couple of years, came back, got in touch with Mark Leasley, worked for another distributor in Calgary, Alberta, and then finally came on board with Mark. Mark subsequently left, and ICA Italy took over. So that's how we ended up where we are today.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't mind a couple-year jaunt over to Europe. Just saying. Like a sabbatical, if you will.
It was a year. I decided I was going to move to Spain.
Okay, so like further, if you want to get specific about it, Spain would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I should have done that 26 years ago, but I digress.
Wait a minute. You would have been 4.
Right.
How can a 4-year-old live on their own in Spain?
Well, yeah. I would have figured it out.
But so Darren, conveniently, you left out a pretty important snippet of your past, being a professional footballer for the Derby Football Club. Now, I did a little research here, and actually, I've had this conversation. Sadly, they're in the second tier of the English Premier League, and even worse, facing relegation.
They are facing relegation. They are pretty terrible.
Yeah, see that look? See that grimace?
His face is turning red. He's getting pissed.
That look is the same look Colts fans had for American football when they blew it against Jacksonville to miss the playoffs. So we feel your pain.
Yeah, no, it's I didn't play for Derby in a professional capacity, but I followed them my entire life, and what's happened to them is just a disaster.
You can feel the pain emanating through the screen.
They owe the taxman a lot of money. They've got other clubs trying to sue them. It's a mess.
Other than that, life's great.
Yeah, 21 points deducted. That's why they're second bottom.
Yeah. 23rd out of 24th. I saw that in the standings. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to hire Ted Lasso.
I've never watched. People keep telling me about it.
Okay, so I was just going to
Really?
ask you, what's your opinion? Do you think it's funny or do you think it's a joke? But I guess if you haven't watched it, then you really don't have an opinion.
Feel good story for the ages.
I've never seen it.
I kind of wonder if, an English person would look at it the same way an American, like the same humor and all that, since it's a big play on British culture and European football, particularly.
I kind of dig the.
I think you should check it out. Give it a whirl. See how it goes.
People keep telling me I should try it. When I get round to it.
There you go. Well, hey, we're talking about ICA a little more specifically here, especially on the coatings front. Would you say, this is kind of our opinion, and certainly one of the reasons why we've been a partner with ICA for, greater than 15 years now. But I would say ICA is really kind of on the forefront of coatings technologies because they always seem to be working on the next thing. And even though that next thing may, at least speaking just for the U.S., may be 5 years out, or heck, some cases even longer, they seem to already be working on what that next thing is. Would you tend to agree with that? And what's your opinion?
Yeah, one of the reasons I was attracted to working for ICA originally was because they are ahead of the curve. They innovate. They lead the market. But at the moment, we've got, I believe it's somewhere in the region of 60 people working over in Italy in research and development in the labs. It changes a lot, so it could be more or it could be less. But the development there is second to none. They're working on new things all the time. They want to be ahead.
Yeah. Now, certainly waterborne coatings are not new technology. They've been around for years, or I should say decades. But the waterbornes of, let's say, 15 years ago versus the ones that are coming out now, certainly different. The technology, the resins, et cetera, have certainly improved. We're starting to see, and especially for us, having facilities and markets throughout the U.S., and each one's a little bit different. The evolution of starting that transition from solvent to water, obviously it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're certainly starting to see it more and more, in particular in markets that might not be on the front end of change. Would you say you guys are seeing the same thing throughout North America, Canada included, obviously? And how would you describe today's lineup of ICA water-based wood coatings?
The lineup today is excellent, especially the exterior and some of the new mono component products that we're seeing, which have similar performance to, certainly comparable performance to solvent-based conversion varnishes. Sometimes even solvent-based polyurethanes. And we're seeing a definite trend towards water-based coatings. A couple of years ago, our sales would have been, in Canada, would have been maybe 25% water. We're now at 40, 45, maybe 48. The US is beginning to change. It's beginning to come in. It's going slowly, but it's now coming on board.
What do you see from your perspective and your experience? What do you see driving that change in either country, Canada, but particularly in the U.S.?
It's the larger companies who want to be seen to be doing and doing the right thing. They need to show that they're sustainable. And the companies who are producing for some of these companies, it's not only sustainability, it's the safety. You've no longer you haven't got the risk of fire, and it's just better for the working environment for the people who work for you.
Yeah, so it's really a multi-tiered approach, whether it's providing a better environment for your employees. There's some marketing to it, obviously, because the end user is driving it back up the chain in terms of what they want. They want more sustainable products. And so there's a multifaceted approach here as to why people are starting that transition, for sure, or environmental regulations, depending on where their facility happens to be located.
Yeah, at the moment, a lot of companies, end users, have been able to steal a march on the competition because they've switched over to the water-based and they've been able to market that and they've been able to use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
I say I think when you mentioned R&D and ICA's position as being the leader in research and development, without a doubt, there's no dispute. Pre-COVID, our last trip to visit the headquarters in Italy and just seeing the updates they continue to make. I mean, it's not like they had something that was 20 years old and decided to finally update it. It's constant improvement in their development lab and their testing facilities. It is bar none the leading development facility that we have seen in the industry. You mentioned a minute ago mono-component water-based products, so single component, more or less ready to spray unless need some reduction, being comparable to a 2-component conversion varnish, which particularly in the Midwest is still the leading by far technology in wood coatings, particularly in the kitchen cabinet and furniture industries, as well as some solvent-based urethane, which of course we also know would be 2-component because you have to have the hardener. Can you speak a little bit to, I think some people might have a sort of a brain shift around, well, if it's 1 component water in the old days, that would be like a 1 component, or in their world, a lacquer or a pre-cap, which is certainly on the bottom end of the scale in terms of finish quality from a dry film perspective. Can you just give a little insight as to why 1K water, like what it is about that drives that quality? And then part B to this long-winded question is, when do you see people using 2K and why?
For the 2K, the chemical resistance is extremely high. That's not to say the new mono components, if you want to use a North American term that people are familiar with, the pre-cap, because it operates the same way as a pre-cap. The testing standard. So at ICA, we don't test a conversion varnish against our water-based because we don't know if that's the best conversion varnish or the worst conversion varnish. We don't manufacture the conversion varnishes. So what we do is we take the mono water-based or the pre-cap water-based and test it to known international standards. So, for example, we have some new products that are arriving in North America that are FIRA rated in the UK. So they meet the FIRA standards in the UK. And the FIRA standards in the UK are chemical resistance, scratch resistance. And the big advantage to water-based over a conversion varnish or over a pre-cap, mono or bi-component, is the water resistance. They're water impermeable. And that makes a huge difference in a kitchen.
Certainly.
Yeah. So it's, the catalyzed versions, the chemical resistances would be right up there with polyurethanes.
Okay. We talked a little bit off air about the shift to water and the trend we're seeing in terms of how people are doing it. And we see when we get resistance to water, I mean, there are a number of reasons. Almost all of them are false assumptions because people think of water when they saw a waterborne coating 20 years ago. And it is 1,000% night and day. 20 years ago water, even 10 years ago water, maybe even 5 years ago water to today's products. But how are you experiencing people making that transition that may not be cold turkey, going 100% from solvent to 100% to water? Is there a way to baby step it?
Yeah, we've looked at the North American market and we've seen that sometimes there's a resistance to take all of your coatings over in one go, which we can understand. It's a big step. So we've developed a range of primers and sealers which will allow for ICA polyurethanes to be coated over the top. So you get the performance of if you're concerned about the performance of the water, because there is a stigma for the water-based coatings, I would say if you look at Nissan cars, are they the same as the Datsuns in 1980 something? No.
That was a very old school reference. You just said Datsun.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, my dad owned a Datsun. That's why I remember them.
Perfect.
So the technology has certainly moved on, but for those people who don't feel comfortable to go all in one go, there are steps we can take to help them get to where they need to move to.
Yeah. So we have an example of that where they really want to stair step it. And in a scenario where they're doing your traditional stain sealer top coat, their first step is to move the stains to water-based. So the VEA 304 is a great example. And then they can stick with their current solvent-based sealer and top coat for the time being over that water-based stain. And then at some point we'll roll into phase 2, which is either going to be, changing out both the sealer and top coat to water, or perhaps maybe just starting with the sealer and then eventually getting to the top coat in phase 3, call it. Certainly doable in a way to kind of ease their way into it.
Yeah. The stains going over a long time ago, the grain rays from the water-based stains put a lot of people off. The VE304 that you've just mentioned is a phenomenal product because the grain rays is minimized. So you get excellent uniformity from it and very little grain rays. So the advantages to it, are huge. The rags, when you're using solvent-based wiping stain, they're a combustible fire hazard.
Right.
Yeah. What kind of addressing
we've seen that happen before.
Yep.
What's addressing the elephant in the room a little bit? You mentioned some of the larger manufacturers that are making that shift for a whole host of reasons. What about the shops, the smaller manufacturers and I'm not talking the 1 or 2 man type of small shop. I'm talking, 10 to 50, maybe upwards of 100 person shop that have issues with making investment in a climate controlled environment, meaning they're spraying in ambient conditions. And in the Midwestern United States, you've got in the summertime daytime temperatures in the 90 degree Fahrenheit with 120% humidity and no rain. And then in the winter, you've got all the way down to 10, 15 degrees Fahrenheit and dry as a bone. How is there a way for people to? That's one of the biggest pushbacks we get is, how am I going to get this stuff to dry? How am I going to get water on a board to evaporate into an atmosphere that is already saturated with water, or get it to slow down because it's flashing so quickly?
Yeah, for the slowdown, and that's a little easier because we can use co-solvents and a little bit of water just to slow down the drying process a little bit if it's flashing off too quickly.
Polysolve.
Accessa. Polysolve.
Sorry, shameless plug there.
Sorry, we had commercial break.
Yeah, no problem. For the drying speed, there's been a lot of development on the drying speed. They're not it's not like you're watching it for days. You may need a few more hours, a little bit more racking, but it's not wholesale changes. And a lot of the time, what you can do to offset maybe a little bit of capital investment is you've got a reduction in costs. You've got a reduction in insurance. You've got a reduction in waste management. You could take some of that and invest it into the oven technologies now are portable and very affordable.
So those Sunspot IR.
Which a lot of people have those these days. Yeah.
Yeah, the Sunspot is the one that I've seen the most of recently. And that one, all you need to do is drywall a room and put a few few of the big lamps in them. And yeah, you're curing it.
Yep.
Are you a drywaller? Is that your weekend hobby?
Yeah, that's my side.
Yeah. I
want to get a plug in there.
It's all about the mudding and the taping. That's where the money's made.
Darren's side hustle. So we talked about ICA being on the forefront of technology and development. I feel like while we're in the process of transitioning to some of these newer waterbornes, there's already another technology out there that is coming right behind it, and maybe you could almost say in tandem with it, which is some of these products that are being made with bioresins. I know that's huge with ICA. It's already rolled out in Europe and perhaps elsewhere, and starting to come into North America. What can you share with us about that?
The bioresin is where we've essentially taken the oil-based resin out of the product to save on the life cycle of the CO2. So we're using recycled vegetable matters, but it's recycled vegetable matter that is not taken from the human food chain. We want to be clear on that because it needs to be a sustainable product. But it's not. People think that the bio is just a water-based technology. It's not. We also have the solvent-based technology. So we've removed the resin, some of the resin in the solvent-borne products, and replaced it and reduced the CO2 in those solvent-based products too.
So you've essentially taken the petroleum aspect. When you say oil, we're talking as a derivative of petroleum out of the equation and inserted food waste, not, consumable food, as you mentioned, but food waste that would just go into landfill and create its own issues, and recycled that into a product that obviously from a sustainability standpoint is recycling the waste, but also in the off-gassing of the product when used in manufacturing is dramatically reducing the carbon dioxide
CO2
emissions.
Sounds to me like an Italian olive farmer is finding ways to sell additional oil or byproducts from making the olive oil. Now he has a secondary market to sell that byproduct too.
Potentially.
I was just thinking about red wine. That's all.
Well, that one property we were looking at, now it's time to buy it because it's got olive oil production. We can then start selling off the waste to ICA for resins.
We're buying property in Italy?
Well, we'll talk later. So what we've seen some of the literature. What else can you tell us about the bio-resin based products, these bio coatings? You and I had a chat the other day about one of them in particular. What would our market find most interesting about these products?
Well, the couple that we were discussing in particular, they have more flexibility because it was a water-based we were discussing, and it's mono or bi component, so with or without catalyst. And the performance values actually improved on the original traditional water-based product. So you're getting a more sustainable product very often with same performance or better performance.
Right. So that's the key. I mean, we both talked the sustainability and the marketing aspects. I mean, that's great. But at the end of the day, someone's going to say, well, that's all good and well. How does it perform? And I think you just shed light on that.
Yeah. The performance values, ICA's lab is not going to put anything out where we're taking the original water-based product, creating a bio product, and reducing the performance of the product. It's got to be the same performance
or better. Yeah, I agree.
And very often it's better.
Interesting.
So I think that what was the product code on that one that you mentioned the other day that we were talking about? Was the single component, 1K or 2K opaque?
AOB 818 G20 was the one we were discussing, the traditional version. And then the AOB 818 G20 Bio.
So Have you guys started rolling out the bioproducts here in North America? And do you guys have anybody using them currently?
We do. We have a large kitchen manufacturer in Ontario.
Okay, so it's already been used on kitchen cabinets now.
Are they using that as their go-to or as an offering, or how? Again, it's kind of back to the same question of how are people transitioning into water? How are people transitioning into bio? And is it this, I guess let me ask a question. Are they using a solvent or a water-based bio?
They're using a water-based bio.
Were they using regular water before?
Yes.
Okay.
They were a water-based regular user before. Now they're using the bio version because it's the next step for them in terms of marketing.
Right.
Because they're in Ontario, which is a market where people are seeing more and more water-based. So they wanted to be that little step ahead of their competitors.
I imagine if you're using solvent and you want to make the jump to water, making the jump to a non-bio water or a bio water is the same jump. You're not going to see, is there a dramatic difference between spraying standard water and bio?
No.
Okay.
If you wanted to go directly to bio, the transition would be very similar to the water-based.
Okay.
You are sitting in a new facility for ICA North America there in Toronto. You've been kind enough to offer a quick tour via phone that promised not to make us feel like we're on a roller coaster. So
I'll try.
Yeah, Darren, do you have any questions for us at all?
No, we're good.
Well, that was boring.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Well, Darren, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Industrious Podcast. And everyone out there, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. Again, if you're watching on the Accessa YouTube channel and you haven't subscribed, hit that notification or hit the subscription or the subscribe button. Sorry. Hit that notification bell. If you like the episode, hit that thumbs up. If you didn't like the episode, you're really going to make Darren upset.
Hit the thumbs up anyway. We need likes. We feed on that.
That's right.
We validate our lives on your likes. So please give us a reason to live.
Happy Valentine's Day. This will probably go out after Valentine's Day, but for those of you
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, happy St. Patrick's Day as well. We'll get ahead of the curve. Again, thanks for joining us and be industrious.